This is Cinnamon Roll, my 1 pound combat robot. And so is this. Sorta. It's actually a 1/5 scale model of it, and I'm making a bunch of them. To give a little explanation as to why I'm doing this, we have to start with a little bit of combat robotics culture. When you go to an event and participate in a fight, obviously things get broken and you have a winner and a loser. At the end of the day though, everyone is still really friendly, and often you go chat with your opponent right after your fight. During this time, you can get a closer look at the damage you caused, take some pictures, and get to learn a little bit more about your opponent's robot. If a part on your robot fell off or was damaged too badly to be used again, sometimes you offer it to your opponent as a little trophy and a friendly gesture. I've gotten a couple of cool parts from other builders this way, and it's a fun way to remember a good fight. An extension of this is that some people and events also have winner's pogs, or little trophies that you give your opponent if you lose. These can be as simple as modified poker chips, but some of the coolest ones I've seen are miniature copies of the actual robot you just fought because they're adorable. I've done this once before, but I wanted to try it again to make a better version for my next competition, and I figured I might as well show how I'm doing it this time around just because it's kind of fun to make these, and seeing the process could give you some ideas for projects of your own. While I could make a completely custom model just for this little side project, it's a lot less work to just scale down an existing one instead, which is what I'll be doing, but with a couple of little tweaks to make it easier to print and assemble. It may not be as precise, but it saves a lot of work, and since this is only for a display model, it'll be more than good enough. To start, I've got my full robot assembly opened up in my CAD program of choice. This is actually just a copy because I want to make sure I don't mess up the original. My plan is to merge pieces together to create only 3 separate parts for printing because it doesn't make sense to print every part separately like I do for the full-size version. The body and shufflers can all be combined and printed as one part because they're all the same color. The top plate and motor mount will become the second part, which will be printed from a different filament and then glued to the top of the body. The blade will be the last part, which I'll attach with a screw. This will let the blade spin, just to add a fun little feature to the model. To start this process, the first thing I'm going to do is suppress or delete everything that either isn't visible from the exterior or has a lot of small details. These will be things like the motors, screws, and switches. I do this because those details would already be invisible or lost when we go to shrink it, and it would just make printing it more difficult. Let's do the body first. I'll start by also suppressing the top plate, motor mount, and blade because we'll be using those later for the other parts. Now, I've just got the main body and the legs. If I were to scale it down and print it just like this, there would be a lot of little bits that would make a mess. What I'm going to do to fix this is add a few more basic parts to the assembly. The goal is to simplify any leftover complex and unnecessary geometry to make it easier to print. I'm going to start with the shufflers. On each side, I'll make a new part, which will be a cylinder that blends in with the body but covers all of the complex bits inside. When it gets sliced, this will all become one solid part, which is perfect because I don't need the functionality and it will be easier to print. I'm also going to do something similar with the body, making a single solid part that just fills in all of the big cavities that would usually be for the motors and electronics. I'm leaving a single hole in the center though, which will be for the screw to mount the blade. Since I'm going to be scaling this down by a factor of 5 in the slicer, I'm making sure that this hole will be scaled up by a factor of 5 in the CAD, meaning that I'm multiplying the diameter I want it to be by 5. When it gets scaled down, this ensures that it'll be the correct size. With that, I've got the critical parts of this body blocked out, so I can go ahead and export all of the pieces at once as a step file to print it. Then I'm just bringing this file into the slicer and scaling it to 20% of its original size. Since the shufflers also have a rounded bottom surface that'll be harder to print, I'll sink them into the build plate a little with the Move tool to make them flat. I'll also turn on supports for the rest of the body and go ahead and print. After taking off the supports, we've got a great start. I can add some of the finer details with the Sharpie and also superglue some googly eyes to it before moving on. Next is the top plate and the motor mount. This one is pretty simple, so I'll just export it as is. Even though it's 2 separate parts, since they're touching and I'm scaling them down, I can expect that they'll fuse together when I print them. This part will just get glued onto the top of the mini model. Next, I'll do the blade. I'll use a big primitive shape to cover up the funny mounting pattern in the center. I also made it just a little bit taller so that when the blade spins, only this surface will touch the body to reduce friction. Then I'll add one more primitive part. This one will become the hole for the screw. Again, I'll scale this up by 5 times the diameter that I want it to be. I'll export these parts as a step file, then import it into the slicer and scale it down. This time though, I need to make one more change. Since my hole was exported as another part and it's still solid, I need to go into the drop-down menu for the step assembly, which contains the separate parts. Here, I'll select the part which I want to become the hole, and I'll change its type from part to negative part. This means that it will remove that volume from the other objects we have in our environment. When I slice it, I'll see that that negative part has created a hole in the blade, which is exactly what we want for our screw. If I print it, I can attach it to the bottom of the body with a screw. If I don't tighten it all the way, then I can still spin the blade. Overall, this is the most straightforward process I've found for scaling down existing models. Strip out all of the features you don't need, cover over the delicate bits, and then just print it. For what it is, it's a simple yet effective way to tackle the problem, and it gives pretty good results with very little effort, so it's fun to do. Hopefully you picked up a few little tricks along the way, and maybe you got some ideas of your own. If you want to follow along with more projects like this, be sure to subscribe.